Hello everyone, welcome to the VE Studio 2019.2 feature release video. We'll go over some of the major features that we worked on in 2019.2. Of course, there's always a full list of bugs and issues that we've fixed that's available to you. Exciting with this release, we've done a lot of work to try to get our documents onto an external Confluent site. Those of you who've received the documents in the past, they've just been PDFs that we've zipped up. So now, in order to access those, you'll go onto our external site, which is docs.disti.com. You'll click the VE Studio side here. And then if you haven't created an account yet, you'll just go to the DiSTI support portal. This will allow you to sign up, create an account, and this will give you access to our docs. I already have one created here, so I enter mine. And here's the front page of our VE Studio documentation. Alongside pushing all of our PDFs onto Confluence, we have a selection of new guides and things like that that'll help you out. On the left side here, you can see the release notes for a particular version if you aren't on the latest version. Normally, you'll just use the latest. The release notes are what we're going to look at today. So number 2 there, and the big important feature is our external facing documentation site. The first one here, warning when the license features are going to expire. This has been a big request from a lot of customers. It can be hard to keep track of that stuff. So now let me open up one of our applications here, and you're going to notice in the bottom right, I've created a license that's going to expire in a couple days. So you see that pop up and tell you this is going to trigger a month out, and then every time you load an application until it expires, it'll tell you how many days are left, so you can reach out and contact us if you need a new license. So we'll take a look at this VR isolate mode. I wrote a start all script for the VR version. It's pretty much the same as the other start all script. It just loads it in the VR mode instead. The VR isolate mode is something that we had done for a couple different projects to allow the user to grab an object, sort of like an exploded mode, but you could grab one piece out of the mesh, the geometry, and take a look at it in an isolated view. We've had this for desktop mode for quite a while. We played around with it in a couple projects for VR, and we finally added it to the project itself. So now any project that you do has this built in by default. So I'm just going to hit run FreePlay here, and then let's switch over to our VE. Now I have the headset on a desk here, so hopefully this isn't going to be too wobbly. So let's go over closer to the Tetris blocks. Anything that you select has the normal window. They're LRU, so you can remove and inspect. Now you have this bottom selection called Isolate View, and it's going to put you into this gray world. You can still teleport around and move in sort of a limited space. This return globe, if you select that, it'll take you back to the environment, and then whatever object you've isolated, you don't have to select it, just click and hold the trigger, and then you can rotate the object around. Of course, we can come up closer to it, see it up close, and rotate that around. So we can return back. We'll pick a different object. We'll pick the door, isolate that guy, and rotate him around. So of course, the thing to be careful of is if you support Isolate View in your project, you'll need to make sure that the back faces are modeled as well. So if I select the canopy here, you'll see we didn't model the back faces on the bottom because it's not intended to be used this way. So there's a little bit of extra overhead to support this, but it's kind of a really nice feature, especially in familiarization and part training. All right, let me come out of my VR mode here. Now, the big feature that we've worked on is our single screen mode. We've had a lot of requests from our customers. Traditionally, we've delivered to classroom setups, which have 16 to 20 students and then an instructor at the front. It's all networked together. But more and more, especially in the commercial world, we'll just deliver on a laptop or app stream or something like that. Until recently, we still have to have the training assistant up because it's what drives the whole thing. And it's sort of not a great experience. So the big push for this release was to support single screen mode. And we do this in a couple different ways. The first one you see down here, running the TA in headless mode. This is essentially going to run the training assistant in the background, but there's no graphical components associated with it. So in our training assistant executable config file, we have this new entry headless. We'll just set that to true. I ought to mention one of the other requests is that our configs are a little bit hard to navigate until you really get used to them. So we have made a new page for this. Our configuration settings page shows all of the various config files, where to find items. I can search for headless here. So it's quite a bit easier to navigate now and find what you need. So in addition to headless mode, we have our single screen mode. That is going to be in our VE settings config file. There are actually two different settings. The first is single screen mode active. This is just going to tell the system that the virtual environment is able to control the virtual training solution rather than only the TA. So we'll set that to true. And then the other bit is to show lesson content. Normally, if you're doing single screen mode, both of these are true. But theoretically, if you don't want to run the TA in headless mode, the VE and the TA will run alongside one another. They'll send signals back and forth. So technically, both of them can control the VMT together. So we're going to mark that as true, and then we're going to start up in our regular mode, our regular desktop mode here. And then we'll take a look at the new features that the single screen mode brings with it. The project that I'm running here is just a really standard project. I pretty much just created it from the VE Studio UI and just hit run. So it's all the basic stuff that's in there. If you want to try this out with your own installer, just make a new project. That's pretty much all that you need to do, and then just tweak those settings. So this is the new screen that you see in headless mode. If I bring up the taskbar here, you'll see that the training assistant is not there. It's actually, this icon here is our training assistant running in headless mode. It gives you the option to quit application. You don't need to do that, but in case that you do need to access it, that's the only graphical element of the training assistant that runs when it's in headless mode. So in the single screen mode, we have the ability to run in FreePlay or to start a lesson. Obviously, we don't have the full complete set of features from the training assistant. For instance, you're not going to watch what the students are doing or create an after-action review or things like that. That's really meant for the training assistant only. This is the way for us to allow a single computer delivery with only one screen. So we have the option to go to FreePlay. We can also run our lesson. You can filter on the type of lesson as well as the execution mode of the lesson. I'm just going to select our remove Tetris blocks lesson in practice mode and hit start. So you'll immediately notice in the top right we have this new informational panel, or rather control panel. This is our informational panel. This top bar is going to give you the name of the lesson as well as the progression through the lesson, how far the student is through it. This bottom area is the currently selected next step. And then this middle bar is the parent group of the next step. In this case, we have more than one step that the student could do at the same time, different paths that they can follow. So we have these left and right arrows that will change what step currently has focus. On top of this, our list button here, this is going to pull out the lesson as well as all of the hierarchy. You can see the group name here, as well as the item that has focus and the other item that we could potentially do. We could swap who has focus there. This is pulling all of the data from the lesson engine DLL, which is the lesson that you created from the training assistant. So you still need to use the training assistant to author the lesson, but now you can execute it through this mode. We still have the same functionality from the lesson execution mode in the training assistant. We can request hints. It performs the highlight. It tells us what the hint is, and in the list it gives us the icon that says that a hint was requested. Let's go ahead and perform some actions here. Remove the L block, remove the other L block, remove the I block. You'll see the bar up here filling up as we're going through. And if we go to the list, you'll get checkboxes for each one of the actions that you did correctly. Now, it does still show errors, so I can go over here and open the door. That's not part of our lesson. Come back to the list, and it shows in this column that we have an error on this particular action. We can click that guy and see what the error is, or if there are multiple errors, it'll all be listed here. In addition, we can pause it We can reset to the last action or the entire session. We can quit out. Let me go through and make some errors again so we can see the grade lesson pane. All right, that's far enough. So I'll go ahead and quit and grade it. So you have a performance summary. This is similar to the data that gets shown in the Training Assistance Analytics page. Hints requested, elapsed time, how far you got through the lesson, what the error types were, that kind of stuff. I know we're going to get some questions on the colors here. This is actually being updated in the next release to be more representative. Green should indicate that there were no errors that occurred. Red will indicate that there were a lot of errors that occurred. So that'll be fixed in one of the later updates. It is customizable since it's part of Unity. It's part of the UI. If you want to go in there and change the colors to purple and cerulean or whatever you want to do, you can do that as well. So quitting takes you back to this regular page here. FreePlay is more or less the same thing as lessons. You have the same sort of controls here. Obviously, you just don't have the list of steps and that kind of thing. So that covers the major features that we have in the virtual environment. I think the final feature that we have here is our project initialization wizard. There's not too much to it at this point. I actually need to bring up our UI here. So if I go to create a new project, we'll just put some garbage data in here. And hit yes. Now in the past what this would do is you'd see some command windows pop up and close and you really weren't sure if you're ready to interact with the environment or when was the right time to stop. We're also doing some things behind the scene in terms of setting up the database, setting up the ports, that kind of thing. So this project initialization wizard builds on top of the content import wizard that we did end of 2018 and provides a nice UI for you to take a look at some of the initial settings for the project. Let's open it up here. So in the past, all of this port information was done automatically. Now you can come in here. If you have specific ports you want to use, you can specify them. I do urge you to be careful. Don't pick ports that are reserved by the OS and things like that. You can find all that information online. In addition, we have our initial launch mode. If you want to start developing for VR or desktop, you can select these and initialize that way. It doesn't lock you to a launch mode. That's just what it's going to start out as. And then we have a nice indicator that's going to show what it's doing, so you're not just sitting there not sure what you're going to do next. And then once it's loaded and created, it'll load the content import wizard afterwards, so that if you have models and you want to go ahead and get started, you can do so. So I think we've covered everything here, our license features, the external documentation site. The one thing I'll mention about the documentation site, we are still working on getting the API, the help desk style documentation for the lesson engine, the utilities, things like that, onto the site. Hopefully by the time you listen to this, we'll have it up and running already. But if you end up needing those before we have it up and running, just reach out to the support team. We'll send it to you. And of course, this documentation will just continue to grow over time. We have our VR isolate mode, single screen mode, headless mode for the TA, and project initialization wizard. Of course, you can see the full list of features, tasks, bugs, everything that we've done for this release. In addition, if we have additional steps that your project needs to take to upgrade things, for instance, if we go to a new version of Unity, things like that, then we'll include that in the release notes themselves. I think that's about it. We'll see you next time.